Buddha's constraining perception to just color or consciousness to just taste. But in the Buddha's time, sight was considered a very active sense base. So perception goes out and labels enemy, friend, loved one. It's very active. Whereas taste was considered passive, so consciousness receives. But what's to note there is that all of those are processes. They're changing constantly. And the Buddha's point was that we take these things as burdens. The beast of burden is a person, as we chanted. But that if we see them just as these ever-changing processes, then instead of constantly reaching into this water and watching it slip between our fingers, we acknowledge that the khandhas, this personality, this form, this identity, are just this much. And they'll shift. But if we have a refuge that's deeper, then we can use them to participate skillfully in the world, and they become tools on the path. Ajahn Jeffs gives the analogy of we take this burden of bricks that we've loaded on our backs and we turn them into the road. We lay the road in front of us to awakening using these aggregates. So the first form is the body. And one thing to note is that the first four of these, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, all are the building blocks of experience. And then the fifth, consciousness, is what holds and understands all those building blocks in context. The Buddha said that those first four lean up against consciousness like a bundle of reeds, and consciousness leans up against them. They're dependent. So we build our experience out of these blocks, and then we watch it fade again. And the body is just something we attach to so clearly. It's solid. And the Buddha really told us and instructed us to see through this solidity we attribute to the body. And just gaining a little bit of insight into the body just being this much. And one really wonderful way to do that is to, when the mind is calm, take a second just to consider that the body is made up of the same things as the world. Think of your bones and how they're calcium, no different than river stones around you, no different than the granite in the earth. It's just calcium. You can imagine your vertebrae as river pebbles lined up on one another. You can imagine the bones as coral. You can imagine the blood as seawater. It's the same salinity, more or less, in terms of your bodily liquids. And then you can imagine giving it all back. You can imagine the body fading again, and watch as the bones just disappear into, and you can imagine the body lying in a grove with ferns and a river by it. And just imagine the body fading into the earth over a few days. And then the water in the body, the blood, all this thing fading into the rainwater and the river. The heat dissipating into the surrounding trees and ferns, and the breath given back. You're only borrowing this body. And just acknowledging that and giving it back. And when the mind is calm, it will see that clearly. And Ajahn Lee was once asked by a disciple, he said, one of my friends said, look, you're a Buddhist. If I hit you, what's the problem? It's not your body anyways, right? And Ajahn Lee said, look, tell him you're borrowing it and you have to take good care of it. So to acknowledge that this dispels fear of death, it gives you a tool against lust, and it just gives you clarity. Some of the most key moments in someone's practice is when they, with a calm mind that can see clearly, the mind becomes strong by resting still in samadhi. The body becomes strong through movement and exercise. So as you gain this clarity and calm and bright, luminous heart through meditation, through practice, through just keeping ethics, sila, virtue, has this clarifying, healing, brightening effect on the chitta that you'll get to see. And when the mind is bright, it can finally see clearly. Before then, it will not be willing to. So when the mind is calm, imagine the bones, imagine the blood is just rainwater. Understand that most of the earth you see around you has been the bones of other animals before. This is just an exchange. The earth doesn't have people on it. The earth is peopling. We're coming up and going back. That's it. We're just borrowing this. And that insight is so powerful that sometimes it can lead to stream entry. As many of the Kruba Ajahns, the teachers say, it's often breaking through that khanda is so powerful, it often shatters the sense of self and allows a glimpse of something much deeper. This mantle of clay, when let go of, allows the chitta to brighten and rise, the mind to brighten and rise. And you can just see your attachment to the body sometimes, like if you often use the analogy or the example of when you get bitten by a mosquito. And it's not that bad, but there's a sense of kind of indignation, like how dare it? And just notice that subtle sense of self that pervades the whole body. And when you let go of that, it's such a gift because we judge ourselves and others by their bodies so much. Old, young, pretty, not pretty. And if you can see detached from that veil of the body just a little, then you see we're all just wearing, it's just the heart wearing these strange clothes, these mantle of clay. And you get to see people's hearts more. It's a gift to others to see through the body. And the body, the Buddha compared the body to a lump of foam on a river. You know, you think of a lump of foam, it looks solid, but it's just composed of all these little bubbles. And similar to the body, it's just skin, hair, calcium, nothing more. So let it go. And this is how you detach. And as each of these aggregates comes into your experience, you can label it. Oh, that's me feeling the body. That's me becoming attached to the body, taking it as self, me and mine. And if you can do that, labeling the aggregates as they come into experience, you distance yourself from them. Jung said, that which we do not acknowledge becomes our destiny. And when you bring something into awareness as an object of awareness, you don't have to implicitly, subconsciously tie your heart to it anymore. You have a sense of a little bit of distance. And that's what this does. And using the aggregate as a path factor as well, and understanding that using the body, the mindfulness of the body is such a powerful tool on this path. If you find anger arising, just come into your elbow. Your elbow is never angry, or very rarely. Come into your feet. One of the interesting things is in the Abhidhamma, there's 4 unwholesome factors that accompany every unwholesome mind state. Ahiri anotapa, so non-conscience and non-concern, a sense of shamelessness basically. Ignorance and restlessness. And because those 4 are present in every negative mind state, it means that if you take away even one, the whole negative mind state falls apart. And often the weak link is restlessness. Because you notice when you're angry, the problem is often the sense of I have to get this out. I have to express it. I have to escape from this sense of claustrophobia. So if you just take that second and ground in the body, circulate the energy like we did this morning, ground and circulate into the ground. Imagine roots deep into the earth. Feed the energy back to the earth. Then the restlessness goes, and you can act skillfully and kindly and from love. The second aggregate is Vedana, feeling. And the Buddha compared feeling to a water bubble after a raindrop hits the surface of water. And as with so many of the Buddhist similes, there's such depth and pristine clarity that comes from the awakened mind. You can see there because a water droplet is the sense impression, a raindrop, and then our response to the sense impression is this bubble, and it's ephemeral, it's glistening, it's colorful. You know, if light catches on it, there's this play of color over it, but it's nothing really. Pleasant, painful, neutral. And yet so much of our experience originates just from this need to run to the pleasant and run away from the unpleasant. Most of our activity in life is running from suffering. Try lying still, try standing still, try sitting completely still for half an hour, and you will begin to suffer. We're constantly moving, constantly trying to avoid it, and not just obviously in literal sense of the body, but new relationships, new angers, a new job, a new career, a new aspiration, always running. And this is why the Buddhists talked about the weak link independent origination of suffering is between feeling and craving. That if you stop and say, oh, this is an unpleasant feeling, then you don't have to begin to crave and run and proliferate and act from that. You just know, unpleasant feeling. And the Buddha talked about this as a way of dealing with aversive words, hateful speech. He said, one should think, an unpleasant sound has hit the ears, and this is unpleasant. That much, that's all. When someone praises you, a pleasant sound, this is pleasant. And when I'm angry, sometimes instead of trying to unravel the whole narrative, all right, I'm supposed to be a good Buddhist, that's not being a good Buddhist. I've had this argument with myself in the shower like 20 times already, it's not going anywhere. Just noticing unpleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. And the Buddha said that feeling, Vedana, is the meeting place, and it's where compassion is hiding. So when you see someone acting in ways that seem hateful, difficult to understand, trace back to the Vedana, trace back to their suffering. Where is this coming from? And we've all had that experience of being baffled by why a spouse or a coworker or a political leader is acting the way they are. And then you learn from the spouse or the coworker or whatever, something that's going on at home or something from their childhood. You learn about the originating wound of dukkha. And there's that sense of like, of course they're like this. If we truly understood one another, we could never be angry, not for a second. So coming back to your own Vedana and others, it's the grounding of compassion. It's the weak link in the chain of suffering. And then to know there's a wonderful discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya where there's a Arahant Bhikkhuni, the foremost in espousing Dhamma, Venerable Dhammadinna, and her former husband, the merchant Visakha, who is a non-returner, also slightly enlightened, a good couple, but not a couple at that time. And they're having a discourse back and forth, and Venerable Dhammadinna says, pleasant feeling is pleasant while it remains, and painful when it changes. Painful feeling is painful when it remains, and pleasant when it changes. Neutral feeling is painful when experienced without awareness, and pleasant when experienced with awareness. Take that in. If we understood that truly, all feeling loses its power. Pleasant feeling is just pleasant as long as it remains pleasant, and then it switches to pain when it changes. It's the two sides of the same coin. If you grab and attach to one, the other will come. And often, a good mantra is if you begin to see yourself buying into something, chasing after something, just say, oh, about to suffer, about to suffer. Ajahn Jeff says we should have a bumper sticker that says, expectations are pre-planned resentments. And it's not that we give up all feeling. This is a path of pleasure, but refining pleasure. We trade the taste of dessert and sugar for the taste of fresh snow. That sounds like a terrible trade right now, but it's good in the long run. And understanding that we are moving towards more refined vistas of happiness. The Buddha said this path is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end. And it just takes time to set down the old forms of pleasure and have faith enough to wait until the new forms of love and brightness come into the heart, we have to release our white-knuckled grip on that which we've clung to allow the hand to fill with sunlight. And that's not easy. It's why the Buddha said patient endurance is the supreme quality, because to hold still our palsied shaking long enough to let the brightness, the eyes adjust to a new form of happiness takes real care, real poise. But happiness and a greater happiness rests on the other end of that dark valley, a hidden majesty of spirit, and you see it. Vedana, feeling. The third the Buddha talked about is cognition, sanya, perception. And perception is how we label and identify something. Friend, enemy, even an object at its most basic, table. And in the Madhupindika Sutta, the honey ball, the Buddha says, with the meeting of the eye, sense consciousness, the eye forms, and consciousness, there's contact. With contact as condition, there's feeling. What one feels, one perceives, sanya, cognizes. What one perceives, one thinks about. What one thinks about, one proliferates on. And then based on those proliferations, categories of proliferation assail and attack one. They turn on us. Our own creations turn on us. But notice in that progression, that crescendo, there's no personal pronoun at first. With feeling as a condition, there is perception. What one perceives, one thinks about. The personal pronoun, me, mine, I, enters at cognition, perception. We bind ourselves through perception. Because when you label something as other, enemy, friend, lover, hated, ally, you give it a valence and you distinguish yourself from it. And you bind yourself to a solidified form of reality. Perception is what's constantly crystallizing this vortex of change into discrete blocks. This, that, him, her. And to note that if you can see how shifting perception is, just complicating it, that notice the power of perception. Notice, and many people have this experience of being on retreat. And over the course of 3 or 4 days, you'll find one person who you really don't like them. They breathe loudly. They should know not to chew like that. They took the last brownie and you were next in line. And by the end of the retreat, you just really, this guy, you know? And to really, first, a very common experience is after the retreat, you'll actually talk to the person and he'll be like, huh, well, they're really lovely. You know, that was weird. That was really weird. And the other is also to value, because there are some people who do breathe loudly and do take the last brownie. And what I remember always is those people are taking on the annoyance of everyone at the retreat on themselves so that it doesn't spray off to everyone else. They are the martyrs of the retreat, because if they weren't doing it, you would be getting someone's aversion. So have gratitude for those people in your midst. They are noble in their own right. But just noticing that shift in perception, noticing how after one exchange, your perception of someone as a friend shifts into something totally different. And when that sense of enemy comes and anger, complicating that, consciously turn your mind towards the good in someone when the negative manifests, when you're justifying the anger. Him, how could he possibly do that? Think of the good things they've done. Some of you know this sutta, but it's just worth repeating. The Buddha's means of dispelling resentment. He said, when you encounter someone impure in speech and impure in body, you should approach them as a man in need of cloth would approach a piece of old cloth on the ground, and using his feet would tear off the clean cloth and leave the dirty one behind. Even so, and then pick up the clean cloth and walk on. Even so, one looks to the good. When you encounter someone with impure in body, but pure in speech, you should approach them like a man in need of water, thirsty, dying from thirst, would come across a pond covered in algae, and gently clearing the algae away, would cup the cool water to his hands and drink of that, slating his thirst, and then move on. Even so, one looks to the good. When you encounter someone impure in body, impure in speech, but with occasional moments of mindfulness, we're getting the bar pretty low here, you should approach them like a person dying of thirst would come across a hoof print filled with water, and bending their lips to the water so as to be careful to not stir up the silt, would drink carefully of that water and move on. Even so, one looks to the good. When you encounter someone impure in body, impure in speech, without occasional moments of clarity, you should look at them as a person sick, dying, wandering through the desert, and think, may they not come to misfortune, may they find safety. When you encounter someone pure in body, pure in speech, with mindfulness, you should look at them as a person dying of thirst would come to an oasis of water, a clean, limpid pool, and diving in, slating their thirst, would rest on the bank. Remembering the good. Hegel said that evil lies in the gaze that sees evil all around it. And especially with news cycles, I am astounded by how people can forget the bright garden we live in for the distant whisper of a serpent. Not that there aren't things to attend to, but how much people allow their worlds to be darkened by headlines when we're surrounded by such love. We can act, we can make change, we can go to things and vigils and protests if you need to, but don't you dare forget the world you live in as a blessing. It is your responsibility as a practitioner. If you want to be a true doctor or nurse for the world, you don't want your doctor to come in and just be like, oh, this is really depressing, and I'm just depressed, by your illness. This is terrible. Give me a second. Oh. You want your doctor to be kind of like upbeat, cheerful, be like, all right, this is a problem, we're going to address it. You don't want a sad nurse. You don't want a sad doctor. You do no one any favors by getting depressed. Stop it. This vague mantra of I need to stay informed, really examine that. How much do you have to be looking at the news to stay informed such that you can make a real difference? Don't allow your heart to be darkened as much as possible. You can make change, you can keep up to date as much as you need to, but perception and our perception of the world matters. Also, just another beautiful thing in that simile, notice that when the person cups the water to their mouth, the motion that in the Pali, it's called Anjali. It's cupping the water in the motion of respect. So being careful to approach those who we have difficult with a sense of care. And then when the person bends to touch the water in the hoof print with his lips, that's a full bow. Humility. Okay, and then sankhara, formations. And this is the most complicated. This is the fourth. The Buddha compared perception to a mirage. It looks like water, it looks substantive, but there's nothing there. And the Buddha compared the fourth, sankhara, mental formations. And these are the act of concocting a mental program. The concoctor itself and the concoction, all of it. So what sankhara does is it constellates all the other aggregates into a program that you run. So you see your boss walking down the hallway, and there's the bodily reaction of tightening in the chest. There's the negative Vedana feeling of unpleasant, really unpleasant. There's the perception, enemy, boss. There's a whole host of memories that come up of this person again, just like last time. How is it going to be this time? This is the whole program running. This is Sankhara. It brings all the aggregates together into an experience that feels solid and has momentum and impulse and power. And the Buddha compared it to a plantain tree, a banana tree, where there's no heartwood. Who here has cut a banana tree before? This is going to be interesting. 3, good, that's actually pretty good. It's rare, but there's no heartwood. It's just like an onion. It's just a bunch of leaves wrapped around each other. And that's all Sankhara is. It looks so solid. It has such momentum. But if you notice each piece of it, oh, this is Sankhara manifesting. This is negative feeling. This is the perception. It fades. It falls away. And to let that happen, and to notice that Sankhara in Sanskrit means a sacred ritual, a sacred formation. And that's much of what this path is putting aside our fraught and damaged and clumsy programs and turning each formation, because we don't have any choice but to create these impulses until we're enlightened, but to make beautiful ones intentionally. How can you create impulses in your life which are sweet and beautiful and sacred? Bowing every morning, meditating every day, program your life. And I find with Sankhara, it's especially relevant at family dinners, family vacations and family dinners, or with loved ones. Because with most people, you can see the distance between yourself and another, but with family members, the tentacles of self have often wrapped so tightly you can't tell where you end and they begin. And to know that so often, your one job in those situations is to not react as the program begins to run. And as you go back to the family, to the loved one, to the boss, you know the Sankharas, you've been there before. You know this play, you know this movie, you've seen it 100 times. So rehearse it ahead of time. When the person says this, I'm not going to react, I'm just going to respond in this way or something. Prepare yourself and let that fall away into something that's less powerful. And what you'll notice is that as the Sankharas come up again and again, driven by impulse, by chaitana, these are what create kama. If you don't react, they lose their power, and it can take years, and it can be discouraging when you keep seeing them come up. But to notice that after 1 year or 2 years, maybe you embarrass yourself, maybe you make a mistake, and maybe you realize where 2 years ago you would have berated yourself for days. This time it comes, but it fades faster. These Sankharas lose their power. And you can miss that. I often think of Sankhara as that little toy monkey with the symbols, and like the big bloodshot eyes. You can get so fixated when you see the monkey come up that you forget to notice that there's this widening space that the monkey exists in. This is a really weird simile. But noticing that the clockwork of suffering still can operate, but it's surrounded by such space. Ajahn Sucitta talks about mindfulness as hovering 1 inch off the ground. That 1 inch is everything. Just having 1 inch between your hand and what it used to grab onto as so tightly. And then finally, consciousness vijnana, that holds and understands and intuits all of these. And the Buddha compared vijnana, consciousness, to a magician at a crossroads. It's constantly conjuring up this magic trick, and it's where we posit self. But consciousness is just arising in tandem with these building blocks and fading again. Rising and falling, 2 bundles of reeds coming and going. But consciousness can become bright and luminous. Ajahn Sucitta says 80% of the practice for the first few years is just brightening the heart, brightening the chitta. And resting more and more in that bright, luminous awareness which surrounds what used to be such a convincing mass of suffering. So these are the aggregates of identity. And the Buddha said that when we see through these, that's our craving to them disappears and we can find awakening. We release our grip on them and we use them at the same time as ways of navigating the path. And as we do that, we find a place beyond all of them. Probably it's something good to wrap this all up, but I can't remember it, so sadhu, thank you.
Han dhamayang dhamakataya sadhu karang kathamase sadhu 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 anumodhami.
Just a quick summary of those. Bhante Anali says the body is where we are, feeling is how we feel, perception is what we perceive, sankhara is why we act, consciousness is whereby we experience. Where we are, how we feel, what we perceive, why we act, whereby we experience. So those are the 5 aggregates. Any questions on all of experience? So please raise your hand and we'll run a mic over to you. And if you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand as well. And Moffitt.
I guess that experience covers a lot, so hopefully this question is right. My question is around changing others' behavior or instincts, something like that. I have a 17-year-old teenager who's very much a teenager, and as a Buddhist-leaning parent, I'm trying to do certain things seem like they'd be helpful instincts for him, and he's a sweet boy. But yesterday, him and his friends were shoplifting beer, and the cops got involved, and so I was trying to figure out when I get home. Hopefully, he'll be awake and trying to figure out like what. It's not exactly a Buddhist question, but like. Just one reflection is it's sort of interesting to me to feel the love that I have for him from that. Like I want him to succeed. I want him to I care a lot. So that's kind of a pleasant feeling. So I guess without really having a distinct question, just is there a way to change behavior that over the long term, like as somebody who's in his life, that is a good goal, or is it just love him as he is and let it go? I don't know. I know you're not a parent, but I still want to ask.
No, I haven't shoplifted beer either, so thanks. Thank you, Moffitt. Yeah, acknowledging that I am not a parent, and I think others here might have better thoughts and hopefully can share with you. And on Wednesday, we have the Zooms, for maybe others can contribute and add it too. I would say, though, there's a few useful things. One is a requirement in the monastic code before we can give feedback to a monk is we have to ask permission, we have to wait for the right time, we have to speak skillfully, or speak truthfully, and we have to speak from a place of loving kindness. And that firewall is so helpful in any context, because the ability of someone to pick up even a slight splinter of aggression or irritation, it changes everything. And it's not actually, in the moment, it might feel like, okay, you've shoplifted beer, your friends did, like I'm gonna be, annoyed. But actually, often if you wait an hour, 2 hours a day, like there's really a place in that space of time where there's no anger, actually, not even a little. And so waiting until that, then asking permission, just showing this deep respect for him as a human, as a person, and an adult, because if you treat him like an adult more and more, maybe he'll step into those shoes to some extent, hopefully. Um, and I think I think that's a really important firewall for any relationship. I think it's unequivocally wholesome, unless someone's running into the road or something, like just save them. But then also to use, Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, the acronym OFNER, framing a conversation very explicitly, say, look, this is going to sound artificial, but humor me. Ajahn Kovilo and I use this all the time. Observation, feeling, need, request. And that paradigm, it sounds so artificial and kind of forced. It is so helpful for saying, my observation, you did this, I heard about it this way. My feeling, I feel worried, I feel scared, I feel like I want to be a good parent, I feel like I don't want to control you, I feel all these things, I feel worried you're going to pull back if I push too hard. It's all there. And then the need, I want to feel like I'm doing my duty as a mother, I want to know you're safe, I want you to be a good person, I want you to, my request is, just reflect back to me what you're hearing. And those 4 strata cover the whole conversation and then have them move back to you if they're willing. And I really find so much of the conversation gets problematized when the observation level is being conflated with the feeling, and it's such a powerful way of communicating. So I think that's really worth bringing in maybe. And then finally, just, to know that of those 4 Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, mudita, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, the 4th of equanimity is in some ways the most profound, because it's giving someone love enough to give them the ability to make their own mistakes. Like as a teenager, it's probably part of growing up is having your friends shoplift some beer, and like, maybe not, but like learning those, being willing, just that acknowledgement of, like you don't have to fix them right away. And the seeds you're planting through your being a good parent, as an example, will manifest over time. But once again, I'm not the best person for advice on this. How did all that land, Moffat? Okay.
It's good. Okay. I want him to be an adult. I want to treat him like an adult. And my instinct is to, ground him and call the other parents. And I don't know if that's kind of, yeah. So I think treating him like an adult to the extent that I can is helpful. So I appreciate that.
It's funny, if you have a skillful means, or we have a word for skillful means in Buddhism, upaya, and usually it's like the middle path isn't one or the other. It's like this slight middle ground with a twinkle in your eye. So like maybe there's something funny you can do. Like maybe every time you say, I really want to ground you, I know that's not wholesome, I'm going to ground myself for the next week. Or like something just silly and stupid, but like funny. Maybe there's an inside joke you have where it's like he has to watch like 5 chick flicks with you, this week. That's his punishment. And like, I don't know if you like chick flicks. I do, or did. I can't. I can't watch them anymore. But just to say, like, a slight twinkle in the eye can be really good. So. Over here, I believe, was next. Joseph, I'm sorry, but I think we're going to open up space to others who haven't spoken as much this week.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the words bright and luminous. I hear them a lot, but how do I know if my consciousness is being bright or luminous? What does it mean?
The Buddha just invoked the imagery of light all the time. He said knowledge arose, light arose, vision arose. And it's just one of the oldest pieces of imagery in humanity, and I think it's for a reason. Like when you see someone who's happy or virtuous, they seem bright. It just is the word. It's interesting because in meditation, if the mind becomes calm, often it will experience the light nimitta of brightness, but people can miss that because often they're looking for a ball of light, whereas it's actually the whole mental landscape becomes brighter. And you don't notice it necessarily unless you're looking. And it's the same in life. Like often we're looking for one thing that's like, okay, I'm improving there. What we don't notice is the whole scope of our life has brightened somehow. And so I'd say just watching for that quality, but to notice that brightness, loving kindness, spaciousness all go together. So maybe you don't notice as much brightness, but maybe things just feel more spacious somehow, more calm, a little more liberative, less claustrophobic. That's a good sign. Yeah. And Ajahn Jayasara says a good metric of practice is less things make you suffer, more things make you happy. It's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, good. Milo or Al, does Alpha have his hand raised? I want to take one Zoom question, but we can run it over to Milo too. Alf, go for it if you have your hand. Yes. Is that a hand? I can't see over the little sticker or the live thing. Oh, good. Go for it, Alf. You're muted, though. We'll go to Milo for a second until Alf can unmute. Milo.
So this is kind of an abstract question, but bear with me. I've been sitting on it for a while, and you reminded me. We talk about anicca a lot, impermanence, and quite rightly. It seems to me there's something that might be an exception to that, and that's information. It might decay, but you can have multiple copies and check them against each other. And this is a trick that would be familiar to an oral tradition. You know, the Buddha's teachings are information that has survived for 2,500 years. The cells in our body come and go, but the information persists. There are many copies. They're checked against each other. And thinking about karma, it might not be a self, but it must be information in some form of what happened in a past life. And if it is manifested behaviorally, it must be inscribed in some way in our brains and our bodies. And so I guess the practical aspect of this is if information is an exception to anicca, maybe it's not permanent, but if it's semi-permanent, is it so unwise to form an attachment to it? Like our minds and our bodies, you know, if these could last longer, is it wrong to want that? And then also with the karma, you know, might we not become attached to positive karma with the belief or the knowledge that it will survive us after death?
Yeah, and I know they just discovered that information is preserved through black holes and Hawking radiation too, so it even transcends that. That was a recent discovery.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. So don't get sucked into one anytime soon, Milo. There's a sutta where the Buddha gives three counterparts to the tilakkhana, anicca, anatta, dukkha. He says, whether or not a tathagata arises in the world or doesn't arise in the world, this element persists. That is the stability of Dhamma, the not otherwiseness of Dhamma, dependent origination, or that conditionality. Tatata, avitatata, ananyatata, idapachayata. And what he's pointing there is exactly the flow of conditions, how things lead to one another, how they condition one another it persists. It's the law. So an information as a discrete element, unchanging, which is what the Buddha is pushing back against, that doesn't persist. Milo, as he is at this moment, does not exist into the future. But a continuity of conditions affecting each other, moving on, does. And that's natural law. That's what the Buddha talked about. And there's a huge strength in that. Because in that phrase, the Buddha says, ta, thusness of Dhamma. And the epithet the Buddha used for himself, tathagata, means the thus come or thus gone. And in that phrase, he's pointing to something so basic, it's almost beyond words. It's grounding, the drum of the deathless. And when you really see how something came to be, you see, oh, this person's like this because their childhood was like this. Or even, oh, I'm grumpy because I didn't eat enough. There's a sense of the heart like, oh, it grounds in that. There's a stability. And that's amazing, you know. So that conditionality moves on. The law of karma continues. The law of conditionality continues. And as to becoming attached to good karma, you know, yeah, we want to create good karma. And then you hold it lightly, but you try to create it because good karma is happiness. The Buddha said, don't underestimate merit. Merit is happiness. So, yeah, you want to hold it lightly, but this is a path of increasing good karma as you let go at the same time. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Milo. Alf, I think let's do it. We have time.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good? Okay. So what exactly reincarnates?
So,
In the 2 minutes that you
well
have.
played, Alf. Well played. So, so this is this question. Some of you will have heard this answer. It assumes karma is in the context of self. So we have this little self that moves along, and karma kind of carries it. Whereas in Buddhism, it's backwards. It's the self occurs in the context of karma. You have these conditions flowing of karma, and one of those patterns is the feeling of self. As to what carries that thing from life to life, once again, you can kind of, you don't have to imagine a little homunculus jumping from one to the other. When a dream ceases, it just a new dream arises. Or you can think of how back in, you know, the 1900s, they were so convinced that light had to travel through a substrate that they invented the whole concept of ether. There's an ether that light travels through, but light just travels. It just does, you know? And so I would say the Buddha didn't get into the metaphysics of exactly what material, whatever you want to call it, is carrying things from life to life. What he said was, just as a burning house would flame from one burning house would leap on the wind to a new house and catch it on fire, even so craving is what carries from life to life. You know, it's not like you have the flame from one house, like walk over, get the flame from the other, like walk back over to the new house. So I'd say there's so many questions the Buddha just put aside, and this is one of them. When asked, like, what is it that reincarnates? He said, look, put aside that question. There's just dependent origination. This is how suffering arises and ceases. And one of the most amazing parts of the Buddha as a teacher is his restraint, because people constantly pushed him for what was the beginning of the cosmos, you know, all this stuff. And he said, look, if you wait to solve the problem of suffering until you have all those answers, you'll never finish. It's like a person shot by an arrow, refusing to have the arrow taken out until they know the name of the person that shot them, their caste, what like poison was used. He said, just take out the arrow, that's it. And that's an amazing, amazing piece of restraint, because the West didn't have that restraint. For about 2,400 years, our philosophy has been circling around rabbit holes. I mean, Kant, Heidegger, Nietzsche, they're fun to read, but really, like, the Buddha was a whole nother level. So, yeah. Thank you, Alf. When people get, like, if ever these seem like putting aside questions in an unfair way, I really think referring to quantum mechanics is useful in the sense of, like, how little we're able to understand what actually happens in reality. Like, to have that humility of, like, we don't know exactly how these things work, but we have no idea how a photon is both a particle and a wave at the same time either. Like, this human logic can only encompass so much. Okay.